I finally have all my track down, glued, tacked where I want it. It's time to install some bus wires and some feeder wires to power the track. But first, have you ever wondered how much voltage drop there is from where you have got your power connected to the track and the furthest distance away? Let's find out. Hello YouTubes, so this is currently, no pun intended, a DC only track. It's connected at one point which feeds power to the entire track. I want to wire the whole thing and future-proof it for DCC. I don't have any DCC locos at the moment or even a DCC control system, but that's in the works, that's coming soon. But for now I just want a reliable track so I can run all my trains on DC without any dead spots. So let me show you how far this train has to go on one point of power connection. Our journey begins here. I've got two wires going in. They come from the underside and they're soldered on here, so it's a good power connection to there. Our train will begin at this point. And I would just like to point out that apparently this little GP loco, which was donated by my neighbour Rick and Ryan, his son, well, this loco apparently was Ryan's favourite loco, so I've invited Ryan round anytime he likes to come and play with his train. It is pretty old. Let's speed things up a bit, this could take a while and I don't have a lot to talk about. Okay, so we need to come round here, up the hill. That will be a station over this bridge. I'm going to replace this bridge at some point. I'm going to make my own because I can't find the one that I really want. So far we are maybe coming up to halfway in the journey, which is about 30 feet already. We're going to take the left switch here. This is actually isolated here and I've just got a couple of wires, so there is no other source of power other than this loop here feeding this entire area. We're going under the mountain now. We're approaching the siding and we're going to come all the way down to here, which is the furthest point, which I've calculated to be about 64 feet. I'm slowing it down, by the way, it's not losing that much power. I can't go any further than that because I've got little isolator connectors. So I want to measure the voltage drop from here all the way to here, as I say, 64 feet, roughly. Let's begin by measuring how much voltage we've actually got coming straight out the box. This is an old 18 volt Troller power supply, but over time it's going to lose a certain amount of power. So let's see what we're starting with. 11.46, roughly 11.5 volts coming straight out the box. So we're already down by what, almost 7 volts. And that's just the wires straight out the back of the controller. So let's move over to the track at the point it's connected and see what we've got there. Let's pump up the power. Okay, so that's full power, 1150. So pretty much the same. So we're not losing any power through the track, well, at this point. I thought there might have been some leakage just because the current's going all the way around the track. Right, let's move to the furthest point away then. Right, I haven't pre-tested this, so you will know when I know what the power loss is. So, right at the start we've got 1150. What does it go up to now at the furthest point away? Well, that's interesting. Zero loss of power, no drop whatsoever. That is a surprise. I'm shocked and stunned, although I did spend a lot of time making sure my track was all nicely laid and all the connections were good. But it does mean that if I run a bus wire all the way around the track, I'm not going to get any voltage drop. Excellent. Right, let me show you what we're going to need to do this project. I will be using household wire, which I think is about 14 gauge, white hot, black ground, or return, whatever you want to call it. So obviously I need to strip them down, run them around the entire length of the track. For the feeders, I'm going to be using this, which is actually solid core, possibly 20 gauge. It's pretty fine, but it's solid, so that's going to be really good for soldering onto the track. I've got different colours. I've got the white and red, and I've got the white and black. So I will probably use the white and red for the feeders, and I'll use the white and black for auxiliary things like lighting, anything that's not going to be used all the time. I want a fairly solid wire for trains because it's going to have a constant, relatively high voltage, whereas LED lighting and switches is a kind of occasional use, so it doesn't have to be mega thick. Now I'm going to be connecting these on the underside with these little doodads. As you can see, they piggyback onto the main power wire, and then you just use one of these connectors to plug it in. Obviously you would connect probably the red one to the thin wire, and then they plug into these connectors. I've used these before. I wired up an entire hot rod and it works fine, and has done for nearly 3 years, so I'm confident they'll work. For tools, I'm going to require my little drill to drill through either side of the track for the feeders, and possibly even a bigger hole to thread the wire underneath through all these beams. I've drilled some holes, but not all of them. Obviously I'm going to require a soldering iron, get different sizes of solder wire and flux. I've got a collection of wire snippers for the big wire, little wire, wire strippers, and the connector crimper. I haven't used this yet, but apparently it's a good one. We will find out. And also, well, I need a sharp knife to strip the household wire, but also a nice LED work lamp because it's going to be dark under there. And my eyesight is not the best. So let's see where I need to add all these feeders. There's no hard and fast rule about how many feeders you should put in. If you want to put in one at every section of track, then go for it. But it's possibly unnecessary. The consensus seems to be about every 3 feet of track. However, I'm going to have to put in quite a few because every single little yellow pin that you see is an isolated section of track. This is going to be where my locos live. So once a loco gets beyond this point here, it won't be powered unless I power that. Likewise there, there and there. So that's room for 3 locos. Once they get beyond these points, then anything in this track can be powered independently. The same over there. There should actually be 3 little yellow pins. Loco's going to come in here, get beyond this isolated section, and be able to be unpowered with just a manual switch to cut the power at that section, and then any stock, rolling stock, goods, whatever can be pulled that way without the loco being powered up. So as you can see, I've got quite a few sections of isolated track. There's one up there for the station platform. This section here for my lake goods area. This section from here is isolated all the way around to that point. That's isolated. So I do have essential powered areas I need to add feeders. And the likes of the main loop all the way around here, I will do the 3 foot rule, I guess. Depends what I've got access to. Obviously it's going to be a wee bit tricky up the back because I'm going to have to climb my way up to solder on some feeder wires at the back. So it's going to be a wee bit tricky, but not impossible. Right, better get started, eh? Oh, I need to clear out all this first because I need access on the underside. Joy. That's better. Oh, it's echoey again. Let's get wiring. So I managed to only stab myself once and bump my head once so far. Okay, I need to decide where my control center is going. I think it's going to go actually down there. I'm going to rearrange my desk to be on that wall and have a little side table here to control all the ongoings of the layout. So step one, I'm going to wire one main lead to go from this controller, which it's not the best controller, but it works. So one main lead from that controller to the bus line, and then we'll wire up the very first section here and do a test. And I'm going to test it as I go to make sure that at every stage it's got power. First thing I need to do is connect my bus lines to my controller, and on this particular controller it has spade connectors. So that's fairly easy. I'm not going to drill a hole in the layout for these to come through because, as I said, this is probably going to set off the layout anyway. This is my new wire crimpers, testing them out for the first time. And they've got little dots in them so I know which colour of connector to use. That's so much better than just squeezing them with pliers. Very nice. So then I can plug them into the back of the controller. Let's go with track 2. I do have the option to have 2 sets plugged into this, but I'm just going to have one because I really only have one main line anyway. Nice and solid. Step 1 is complete. So moving on to the first set of feeders, which I've already got soldered on over there. I will drill a hole through the layout for these and I'll see you underneath. So that's my first set of feeder wires through, and I have one with a red line. So that's going to go in the white, red hot, white hot, and the plain white one is just going in the black. So I need to attach a couple of these connectors. Now I'm going for the biggest ones. The yellow ones are the biggest ones because it has to get through the solid core wire, which is not very forgiving compared to stranded wire. So the good news is that I can just use any of the spade connectors, namely the smallest one, the red one, will still fit in this plug when it's all together. So let me throw these on, connect it all, see if it works. So what did I say? Red hot, white hot. Red to white. White to black. Excellent. So now we can go upstairs. Well, you know what I mean. Test out the power. Moment of truth. Power on. Turn up the power. Off he goes. My first feeder wire is successful. Make sure it works coming back the way. Very nice. Just need to repeat that process a couple of billion times. But I'm going to start with the isolated sections of track just to make sure everything on the track works. So, soldering iron then, eh? Actually, before I get too carried away, I'm going to go around the whole track and put these little red pins on the correct side. So red will be hot, so I'll know not to cross the wires over. So let's figure that out. If the red was on the inside, then we are red there, crosses over to this track, which is isolated. So red will be there. So it was on the inside here, but now it's kind of in the outside, if you know what I mean. It's still in the inside of the layout. So let's stick a red pin there. Let's see, other sections of isolated track. This section over here, I know this seems like a really silly way to figure it out, but better safe than sorry. So red on the inside, which is still red on the inside. Red on the, well, it's red closest to the wall. It's kind of on the outside of where you're looking. So red on that side. Don't worry, I'll figure it out. I'm sure there's an easier way, but when did I ever like doing it the easy way? Right, I'll see you in a minute when I've got my pins in place and I've got the soldering iron out. Red pins are in place. Well, to be honest, I ran out of red pins, but I've got enough to be getting on with. So I think I want to start with this section of track. And then we can maybe move on to this section of track. I really want to get this section of track done so that I can actually have somewhere to park trains when I'm on the main line. But for now, let's not jump the gun. Let's start with this one. First thing we need to do is drill a couple of holes. Now, ideally, you want to use as small a drill bit as possible because your wire is tiny and you kind of want to hide it. However, below this 1/4 inch cork, I've got 1.5 inches of foam and then 3/8 of an inch of ply. There's no way that that drill bit is going to get all the way through. Plus, remember, the drill bit still has to get into the drill to be held in place. So I'm going to sacrifice looks for a drill bit I know that's got a good chance of getting through, namely this one. It'll still fit in between the sleepers. And if you do it tidy enough, you're going to be covering, well, I will be covering this with ballast anyway. So it should disguise it as much as possible. Right, let me drill some holes. Okay, let's go with this one here because the sleepers are quite well spaced apart. And obviously, once you get through, you don't want to be bonking onto your track and bending it, so maybe want to put something in there just to prevent damage. I can't find anything. Let's try this. I think we were successful there. Just going to make sure that goes through before we proceed. I'm going to cut a length of maybe 1.5 feet of this wire. I have plenty. It's easy enough to trim it back if I've got too much. So we are looking for red and white for this side. Poke that down there. Make sure it's going all the way through, if I can find the exit hole. Just need to tidy up the hole a little bit. The hole seems to have resealed. That's kind of weird. Yeah, I forgot to use my little safeguard. No idea what happened there. Anyway, I think we're through this thing. Let's make sure. What is going on? Keep this wire as straight as possible. Give me a fighting chance here. This is a mystery. Yeah, I think it's just getting filled up in the shrapnel of the wood. There we go. We are through. Right, I'll do the same on the other side, and then we'll get the soldering iron heated up. Awesome. Right, the next step I actually saw on someone else's channel, and it was another way to another way to hide the connections a little bit. So I'm going to cut that much of the insulation off, and then I'm going to bend it over, like so. And then I'm going to snip most of that off. The idea being that this section here, you can see it just hooking over. Hopefully that will just catch on the bottom edge of the track, and you really shouldn't see any of it by the time it's soldered on, except for the big giant blob of solder, no doubt it's going to be left behind. Do the same with this one. Bend it in the way, snip most of it off. I'll tin that, put some solder on the track before we start, and then hopefully all we need to do at that point is move these down, heat up the solder, and attach these wires. That's the plan, and we know how plans always go. A little bit of flux just to persuade it to heat up. And before I continue, be warned, I'm a terrible solderer. Absolutely awful. But no one else is going to do it for me. Also, you should probably have like a damp cloth over the track to stop your sleepers or your ties from melting. But I just don't care, so well, I actually got a bit of solder on there pretty quickly. That was a world's first. The flux definitely helps. Also successful. If the solder is like higher than you would like, you can always just sand that down a little bit, I guess. Right, a little bit of tinning, I guess, on these. Actually pretty good using this solid wire, because it stands up by itself. Oh my goodness, look how shaky my hand is. What's that? What's going on there? Get that red one done. These wires are so fine, it's really hard to see if you've got anything on it. Oh, there's a nice bit of solder on that one. Okay, and I will of course be using my tweezers so that I don't burn my wee fingers. Let's poke this one down there. Hopefully this will just insert itself in once it's heated up. Behave, come on, get in there. It's a little bit higher than I would like. But hey, it's my first go. I don't mean it's my first ever go at soldering, it's just my first go at trying to get this track wired. I bet this one turns out really nice and no one's ever going to see it. That's way too high. Okay, not too bad. I mean, it's awful, but it'll work, hopefully. As before, we need to connect these two wires with a couple of these spades. Sorry, these two wires, you didn't see what I was talking about. A couple of spades. Need to attach a couple of these yellow things to the bus wire. Maybe do that. So, red to white, white to black. Let us test. Our little CN Jeep should now make it from there all the way down to there, and then there's insulator there, so it can't go any further than there. But this section of track should now be live. Let's find out. What seems to be the problem? Let's lift it over to here, just in case I manage to get the wires the wrong way around. Right, full disclosure guys, because I don't want you to think everything always goes as planned. Right, you see this little spade connector? You see how the spade is over to that side of the plastic? Well, it's not making contact because it's not going in. It's not going in that little slot. Please focus. It's going over the top of the slot. So I just need to bend that spade to the center of the connector and hopefully it will go back in. As I say, I don't want to pretend everything works perfect first time, but you can see how that's a problem. Worth checking every time you connect these things. Right, I'll see you top side. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. I'm just going to let it go all the way till it runs out of power on the track, and you'll see what I have to do next. And it should stop about now. Wow, it goes quite far. You gotta love these Athearns with their flywheels to keep the momentum going. Okay, what's next? So you're probably wondering at this point, what is the point of isolating all these sections of track if I'm just going to power the whole track? You got to remember, eventually this track will be DCC, but at the moment it's just DC. And I want to be able to make maneuvers with trains. At the moment, I could only run one train at a time, right? If all the track's powered, then only one train is really usable, unless they're both going at the same time. So in order to do that, I will be interrupting all these isolated sections with a simple on-off switch. So if the switch is in the up position, that section of track will be live. If it's in a down position, that section of track will not be powered. You get me? And I'll show you how I'm going to do that probably in a later video, because this video is getting long enough. Meanwhile, I need to power every isolated section of track and test it. So I'll see you in a few seconds. So they have a saying in the welding industry, if you're not good at welding, you better be good at grinding. Apparently the same rule applies to soldering. All my track is now powered, including my little future railway museum, this inner loop, and my mountain railway station siding. Oh, everything's done now. I didn't go too mad with the feeders because remember, right at the start we did the voltage drop test and I wasn't getting any voltage drop even for this section. So if I do encounter any problems, instead of adding more feeders, I'll just solder where it's dodgy. Just put a little bit of solder at a joint on either side. Much easier than crawling underneath and adding more wires. So now we need to test. Well, obviously I've been testing as we go, but you've not seen what I've been testing. So will we go for my CN or my Chizzy? I think both. These locos travel at different speeds, so this could get a bit sketchy. Enjoy. So there you go. Now, even though it's only just one main loop, there's actually quite a lot of track to play with. Still got quite a lot of wiring to do, obviously, because I want to automate all my points, switches, turnouts, whatever you want to call them. And obviously I need to add switches for the isolated sections of track. None of that is going to matter once I go DCC, but that's not going to be for a while. The main thing is I can start some scenery. And because I have no more switches after that point there, all the way around and up the hill and round and across the bridge, I can basically start the scenic stuff right here. And if you've been watching my recent videos, you'll know that my new patron, Derek Scott, sent me a pile of scenic scenery stuff, plaster Paris, what's that, sculpt-a-mold, tree stuff, lots to be getting on with. Thank you very much, Derek. If you want to help out, link in the description, much appreciated. But that's it for now. I may or may not be over 1,000 by the time this video comes out. If you're one of the first 1,000 subscribers, thank you very much. It means the world to me. Right, fun stuff. See you in the next one. Bye for now.